First of all, this video may contain spoilers for both shows, so if you haven't seen them, then I strongly recommend that you watch them. I mean, you should watch them both anyway, because they're both really, really good. And obviously this is subjective, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion, so you're allowed to disagree with what I'm saying. But these two shows are regularly pitted against each other, because they are similar in many ways, and are created by the same people, most notably Greg Daniels and Michael Schur. Now, I love both shows, and have watched them both multiple times. However, I genuinely feel that Parks and Rec is better than The Office. The first part is the difference in characters and character development, which are some of the most important aspects of a situation comedy. The character dynamic in both shows are quite similar. At the start of each series, you have the boss, who shouldn't really be the boss, the over-enthusiastic, hard-working employee, the sarcastic and laid-back worker, the temp and intern, the normal character who has a slightly different job to the others, for example, receptionist and nurse. Now, these character descriptions are very generalised, and sometimes the characters are actually polar opposites, but it shows how both shows start with very similar characters, but portray them and develop them in completely different ways, and in my opinion, more successfully in Parks and Rec. One of the biggest differences in characters is between Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell in The Office, and Ron Swanson, played by Nick Offerman in Parks and Rec, who interestingly auditioned for the role of Michael Scott. Michael Scott starts off as a quite unlikable character due to his ignorance and inability to act appropriately in social situations, which most of the time comes across as overly awkward and cringy, which, while this works in the UK Office, as this is the main style of comedy, the random moments of extreme cringe makes the audience uncomfortable. For example, in the pilot, Michael pretends to fire Pam, which, while it works in the UK version as the dry, borderline offensive humour of David Brent, fits in with a dull and dreary environment, and is more commonly used in UK comedy than in the US. The US version comes across as a bit more fake and superficial, almost like it's an act. Now, maybe this is because I watched the UK version first, and they attempted to copy the pilot word for word from the UK version, which introduced the show as almost like a knockoff. However, the producers did recognise this and decided to drop the British dry and cringy humour for the most part, and it became its own show. And in my opinion, it's better than the UK version, which I know a lot of British people may hate me for saying. When it found its own comedic style, the characters, and Michael especially, became more developed and fleshed out as people. The cringy humour was still used, but more sparingly, most notably with the infamous Scott's Tots episode. Here the cringy, self-deprecating humour works, and it shows how Michael's ambition and desire to be liked falls flat. It's cringy, it's sad, but it's successful in developing Michael's character. Michael firing Pam just comes across as cruel. The only intention here is to impress Ryan. Michael's character development is the strongest in the series and should be commended. He comes across as more likeable, and we learn more about him than we do about any other character. Michael showing up to Pam's art show when no one else in the office does shows how he genuinely cares for his employees and acts completely selflessly, even buying a piece of her art. His intentions here aren't for popularity or commendment, but purely because he cares, and I think it's one of the most heartwarming moments of the show. Michael's counterpart is Ron Swanson, who is probably the character my political opinion differs with the most, but despite this, he is so likeable, he's funny, and he's a strong character from the start. Despite being a strong and developed character from the start, he still develops over the series, and he doesn't stagnate. He goes from being a lone, stoic, overly masculine man with little to no friends, which is by his own choosing, to a married man with 3 children who even goes to ask for a job in federal government, which he is inherently against as a libertarian, just so he can work with his friends. He becomes more in touch with his emotions, which is a huge change since the start of the show. I can't talk about character development without talking about Andy Bernard, as his character development ends up being the worst of both The Office and Parks and Rec, which is a shame, as I did really like his character, and his original character development was really strong. Andy is introduced in season 3 and is a jealous, annoying and attention-seeking character, but overall he is a good character, especially in contrast to Jim and Dwight. Andy works in the show when he is first introduced because his elitism combined with his anger issues makes for a very entertaining yet destructive display, and shows how Jim's pranks can often get out of hand. When he returns from anger management, he is a completely different character. He even asks people to call him Drew instead of Andy. And this is intentional. It was showing this name change, which, while it doesn't last, shows that Andy is returning a different person. His relationship with Angela develops his character very well, as he shows his romantic and sentimental side. He's prepared to embarrass himself to win her over, something I doubt he would have done when he was first introduced. And I genuinely feel sorry for Andy in this relationship. He makes himself vulnerable and compromises so many times when planning the wedding, and when Angela's infidelity is revealed to him, he accepts it relatively well, at least in comparison to how he would have reacted before his anger management training. Andy's pursuit of Erin is something I initially quite liked. I thought they made quite a good pairing, but I feel like it dragged on a bit too long. I believe they were attempting to mirror Jim and Pam's relationship arc, with them obviously having feelings for each other and almost getting together before they finally do. However, after him driving back to win her over and romantically kissing her in the road, instead of them getting together, he goes off sailing for 9 episodes. Now, this was done because Ed Helms was filming The Hangover Part 3, but for some reason, instead of having him come back as the same character, he returns as a completely different person. He is ignorant, he alienates everyone at the office, and he dismisses Erin, the woman he spent like 3 seasons pining for. There are many similarities between Season 9 Andy and Season 1 Michael, which I just don't understand, since they knew that Season 1 Michael did not work. I just don't understand. One thing that I think makes Parks and Rec more successful and entertaining than The Office is the recurring characters. The main casts are pretty much comparable, but Parks and Rec is much more successful in introducing developed guest characters and recurring characters, which enables the main cast to interact with them in humorous ways. For example, we have Sean Ralphio and Mona Lisa, Jeremy Jam, Tammy 2. They are antagonists to the main cast, which pushes them. We see the main cast disagree with each other, work together, and it's successful. They also work to show hilarious contrasts between the characters' work life and personal life. April, the sarcastic, apathetic, goth-like character, has overly jolly and friendly parents. Jerry, the bumbling office fool, has an insanely interactive wife and family. Ron, the man who makes fun of anything that is not typically masculine, is a popular jazz musician. I like the fact that they have more time outside of their office than the characters in The Office do, as it adds more variety and excitement. We see more into the characters' lives, relationships and hobbies than we do in The Office, which allows for more introduction of guest and recurring characters. Obviously, the point of The Office is to show the lives of people in a mundane office environment, but I feel like adding a bit more of their lives outside of The Office would develop characters more and strengthen them. Similarly to how we see Pam's love for art and attempts to go to art school, we saw a completely different side to her than the role of an office receptionist. Also, one of the most hilarious and successful episodes of The Office is the dinner party, which conveys how showing the characters interacting in a setting outside of the office can reveal a lot more about them and should have been used more, in my opinion. Now, The Office does have some recurring characters like Jan, David Wallace, Daryl, and my personal favourite, Mose. And in the first season, everybody else in The Office, bar Michael, Jim, Pam, Dwight, and Ryan, are just recurring characters, similar to Jerry and Donna in Parks and Rec. And while it was a smart decision to make them all starring characters, it sometimes needed an outside character to come in and shake it all up a bit the way Jeremy Jam or Tammy 2 does. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of having a large starring cast which reaches a peak of 19 main and starring characters in Season 8 of The Office, while Parks and Rec only reaches a peak of 10, but has more recurring and guest characters. This makes the character development consistent, and there's no need to change up the characters for entertainment. They bring in a character that forces them to confront their weaknesses, which they do in a comedic way. This also allows for characters to leave without really disrupting the dynamic. Chris and Anne's departure from the show is emotional, and I do miss the characters, but they don't really leave an empty space in the show. While, in comparison, when Michael leaves, they spend 2 seasons basically trying to fit the hole he leaves. Parks and Rec even goes on to show how bad this is when Leslie tries to find a new best friend. Now, I definitely do understand the reasoning behind trying to find a new boss, because an office needs a boss. However, over 3 seasons, there are 7 managers, which it just drags on for just way too long. That, I think, is my main criticism of The Office. They have great concepts and great humour, but things are just dragged out. Dwight and Angela's relationship, Andy and Erin searching for the new boss. I think if they had just done 1 season after Michael left, many of my criticisms wouldn't be valid. They even attempt to ruin Jim and Pam with the whole cameraman thing, which felt so unnecessary, an attempt to create drama. That's really what happened with the last 2 seasons. They went for drama over comedy, and everything surrounded relationships to a point that it got tiring. That's not to say I didn't enjoy the last 2 seasons. There are many really funny parts. It's just a shame that a show that basically resurrected itself after the first season and became so amazing declined so rapidly at the end. The relationships and friendships in Parks and Rec are overall a lot stronger than in The Office. This may be due to the smaller main cast that Parks and Rec has, which forces the characters to interact with each other to a greater extent, which helps to develop and strengthen their relationships. There are many strong relationships in The Office, most notably Jim and Pam, who are an amazing couple with great chemistry from the beginning, and their relationship flourishes as it develops. Michael and Pam also have a great relationship, as well as Dwight and Pam. Pam definitely forms the strongest relationships, which I believe is due to her role in The Office. As the receptionist, she interacts with everybody a lot more frequently, and therefore she's able to develop stronger relationships with more characters than others do. Jim, for example, only really develops strong relationships with Pam and Dwight, and Ryan, for example, only really with Kelly. In comparison, Leslie, for example, has strong and developed relationships with Ben, obviously, Anne, April, Ron, Tom, Chris, and Andy. This could be because Leslie is the type of character to make friends with a lot of people. So let's look at Ron, the character who makes an effort to not connect with people. Despite this, he has clear and strong relationships with Leslie, April, Andy, and Tom. Ron and Leslie's friendship is very clear, even though they disagree on a lot of things. Ron teaches Leslie to take things slower and to be less impulsive, and to accept help from others, while Leslie teaches Ron to let people into his life and that it is okay to change. Their fundamental characteristics never really change, and they both remain true to their character, but they develop together very well. The relationships in The Office, while they make for great comedic moments, they are not really healthy. Jim and Pam's relationship is definitely one of the strongest. The build-up to it is great and satisfying, and I can't really fault it, to be honest. I have seen a lot of criticisms about their relationship online, the main one being that Jim makes massive life decisions, such as buying a house, without talking to Pam, which, yes, I can see the issue with it, but it is something that Jim and Pam discuss in the final season when he invests without telling her. While they do have problems, I think it shows that no relationship is perfect and it constantly needs work, which I think works very well in the show. Dwight and Angela's relationship is one that I originally liked. However, all they did was cheat on other people constantly, and it got a bit tiring. Ryan and Kelly are definitely my least favourite couple. Again, they constantly cheat on each other and hurt each other, and to be honest, I actively root against them, even though they are an amusing couple at the beginning. In comparison, Leslie and Ben support each other's dreams and ambitions constantly, even if it means living long distance or even quitting their jobs. A big distinction between Jim and Pam and Leslie and Ben is that Leslie and Ben, for the most part, make decisions together. Anne are similar to Dwight and Angela in a way that they are on and off. However, Chris and Anne originally break up and then they work on themselves before getting back together. Anne works on not taking on her boyfriend's personality, and when they get back together, she remains true to herself. Andy and April are almost a wild card in the fact that they get married so soon, and no one expects them to last, yet they are one of the strongest couples. Now, I'm not saying any of them are perfect, as they're not, but all of them successfully work through their problems in healthier ways than they do in The Office. Okay, so there's my opinion on The Office versus Parks and Rec. Now, obviously, the comedy aspect of it and the characters are very much subjective. It's what you like. If you like the more upbeat nature of Parks and Rec, like I do, then obviously that's going to be better in your opinion. However, just technically with the character development and the characters themselves, I just think that Parks and Rec is so much stronger. So yeah, feel free to disagree with me and let me know what you think down in the comments. Maybe I'll do another video about why I prefer the comedy style in Parks and Rec. But yeah, there you go. Thanks for watching.